U.S. forces retain the inherent right of self-defense and are authorized to meet threats with a swift and forceful response. Force protection is paramount in this phase of the operation. Over the weekend and into today, evacuation operations continued. Yesterday, 26 U.S. military aircraft, all C-17s, departed with approximately 1,200 evacuees. In total, there were 28 flights out of Kabul airport in the last 24 hours, which included the remaining coalition departures. As of today, more than 122,000, including 5,400 Americans, have been evacuated from Afghanistan. U.S. military troops have shown tremendous bravery and compassion as they put themselves in harm's way to evacuate as many American citizens and Afghans as possible during this operation. That work by U.S. service members continues across the globe at a number of intermediate staging bases and DoD installations. In CENTCOM, more than 27,000 passengers await follow-on movement from 6 active locations. In EUCOM, 3 active locations currently have more than 22,000 passengers, and today 17 flights will transport about 3,700 passengers to both Dulles International Airport with approximately 11 flights and Philadelphia International Airport with 6 flights. In NORTHCOM, there are nearly 13,000 passengers that remain at 5 different U.S. installations. These numbers are a snapshot in time, and movement of personnel is very fluid. We do not expect these passenger totals to match the total number of evacuees from Afghanistan, nor will they match the total Afghans arriving to the United States. The mission of the evacuation operation was to help as many people as possible leave Afghanistan. Some of these evacuees included American citizens, third country nationals, or Afghans whose credentials permitted them to otherwise depart without processing at a military installation. Military, civilian, and contract personnel continue to work closely with both government and non-governmental agencies to meet requirements and provide additional capabilities for families as they continue their transition. While operations in Afghanistan will conclude soon, the DoD effort to support the interagency is ongoing. Additionally, the Department of Defense continues to support humanitarian relief operations in response to national disasters here closer to home. In Haiti, the U.S. military assets have flown 560 sorties, providing rapid logistical and airlift support, including delivery of more than 348,000 pounds of aid. On the Gulf Coast with Hurricane Ida, NORTHCOM, as of this morning, in coordination with FEMA and our National Guard, has activated more than 5,200 personnel in Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, and Alabama in response to the hurricane. They bring a variety of assets, including high water vehicles, rotary lift, and other transportation capability to support recovery efforts. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is operational in New Orleans and is assessing the storm's impact. DoD stands ready to assist as requested by FEMA. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have anything to add, so we'll go to questions. Lita.
General, one quick follow-up and then a question. The CRAMs, did they strike and hit all of the 5 rockets, or did some land in areas where there are just no casualties? So
we can assess the reporting from last night's rocket attack. We assessed that 5 rockets were in the air and went. 3 landed off the airfield, were no effect, and CRAM was able to affect and thwart the attack of one, and the other rocket landed with no effect to the mission or any danger to our personnel.
And then secondly, on evacuees, does the U.S. and the U.S. military assess that the number of Americans still in the country are only the ones that no longer want to leave, or the ones who want to leave, are they largely out now? And it's our understanding that the evacuation of Afghans is largely complete also. So are you now solely concentrating on just getting U.S. troops out and equipment?
So just going back, total, 122,000 were evacuated, approximately 5,400 Americans. We continue to have the capability to evacuate and fly out those until the very end. But as you talk about active peace, we're continuing to work with Department of State on that and continue evacuation and military operations.
I would refer you to the State Department on the numbers of Americans they're still in contact with. That's something for them to speak to. Tara?
Could you both speak to the continuing rocket threat to the final planes that are leaving and the role that the CRAM is playing? Will the CRAM be left behind, or since it's so vital to protecting the planes as they're leaving, what will happen to the CRAM after it goes?
We certainly assess, as the general said, that there's still an active threat in various ways that we have to be prepared for. And what I will tell you, without getting into the specific systems and their availability, which I think you can understand why we wouldn't, we continue to have and will maintain the capability to protect ourselves and defend ourselves as we continue to complete the retrograde. And I think that's probably the best place to put it.
And just one follow-up, please, if you may. A number of us have gotten reports from either American citizens or vulnerable Afghans that are still on the ground and can't get through the gates anymore. They've been getting notices that the evacuation is over. What happens next for those that are left behind? Will there be any sort of military operation to help get them out of the country?
I think you heard Secretary Blinken talk about this, that for Americans and other individuals that want to be able to leave Afghanistan after our withdrawal is complete, that the State Department is going to continue to work across many different levers to facilitate that transportation. And as I said earlier, right now we do not anticipate a military role in that effort. Jen?
John, General Taylor, you just said that one rocket landed with no effect to the mission. You mean it landed inside the airport perimeter, but it did not affect the mission?
It landed inside the perimeter and had no effect whatsoever.
And these ISIS-K fighters or planners that you have targeted with drone strikes in the last few days, are any of them, were they released from the Bagram prison or from Pulicharki prison? Were they known combatants who were inside those prisons?
I don't think we have that information.
And lastly, if 5,800 Americans were left in Afghanistan when you pulled out of Bagram at the end of July, why did the U.S. military not begin evacuations of Americans before pulling out of the country?
Jen, we've talked about this quite some time ago. I'm happy to revisit it. We were already baked into the retrograde plan way back in the spring, was the possibility for non-combatant evacuations and helping people get out. And we were in constant conversations with the Ghani government, as well as our colleagues across the interagency, about what that would look like and when would be the right time to do that. And in anticipation of it, well before the provincial capitals started toppling there towards the middle of August, Secretary Austin pre-positioned forces closer into the region to the degree of taking an entire Marine battalion off of the USS Iwo Jima and moving them ashore to Kuwait so that they would be ready. So this was something that we had been planning for and preparing for. The timing of these things is always very delicate, as you might imagine.
But you were essentially stopped by the State Department from beginning those evacuations.
I wouldn't say that, and I don't think it's important right now to get into internal deliberations. We were obviously still in close contact with the Ghani government, which was still, he was still the president of the country, and you have to be able to have those conversations too, because our expectation was that the Ghani government would stay in place. Nobody could have imagined how quickly that government would have literally just dissipated almost overnight. There was simply no way to predict that. Idris?
Can I ask a couple of questions on the gates? Are any of the gates still open, and are any of the gates under Taliban control?
I think it's right now, as we get into the this has always been a dangerous operation, but we're in a particularly dangerous time right now, Idris. I think you can understand that we're not going to be detailing the status of any particular gate right now. As the general said, we still have the ability and the capability to conduct evacuation operations even while we are completing and working to complete the retrograde of U.S. forces.
Quick follow-up. You've now had two incidents, one on Thursday and one on Sunday, where there may have been civilian casualties or reports of it. Beyond investigating it, do you have any indications that those reports may be accurate?
We are not in a position to dispute it right now, Idris. And as the general said, we're assessing and we're investigating. Look, make no mistake, no military on the face of the earth works harder to avoid civilian casualties than the United States military. And nobody wants to see innocent life taken. We take it very, very seriously. And when we know that we have caused innocent life to be lost in the conduct of our operations, we're transparent about it. We're investigating this. I'm not going to get ahead of it. But if we have, verifiable information that we did in fact take innocent life here, then we'll be transparent about that too. Nobody wants to see that happen. But you know what else we didn't want to see happen? We didn't want to see happen what we believe to be a very real, a very specific, and a very imminent threat to the Hamid Karzai International Airport and to our troops operating at that airport, as well as civilians around it and in it. And that was another thing that we were very, very concerned about. Over here, David.
The President had said that the likelihood of an attack within the next 24 to 36 hours was highly likely. He'd been told that by his military commanders. Then after that, there was the strike on this vehicle. After that strike, is another attack still considered highly likely?
We are operating under the assumption that we need to be prepared for future potential threats. And as the general detailed for you in his opening statement, there was, in fact, after we took this airstrike against this vehicle, there were rocket attacks, indirect fire rocket attacks on the airport. So the threat stream is still real, it's still active, and in many cases it's still specific, and we're taking it very seriously, and we will right up until the end.
You didn't specifically answer the question about whether the Taliban, you said you weren't going to talk about who was at what gate, but are the Taliban on the airport?
Not to my knowledge, they are. No. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a few today. Sorry. You mentioned 122,000 have been evacuated. How many of those are SIVs and their families?
I don't have a good breakdown of how many in the 122,000 are SIVs and their families. That's really a better question for the State Department. We know that roughly 5,400 of the 122,000 are American citizens, and the vast majority, of course, are Afghan, and I just don't have a breakdown of that.
Well, our reporting is saying that there are about 7,000 of the 88,000, so that leaves more than 80,000 SIVs and their family members left behind. Does the Pentagon see that as a success, leaving 80,000 people, SIVs, who worked alongside our troops behind?
Carla, I can't verify that number, the math you just gave me, and I can't tell you what the breakdown is right now between the more than 12,000, maybe more, Afghans that we were able to evacuate in the course of less than a couple of weeks. I can't give you the breakdown right now. I honestly can't. What I will tell you is that obviously we wanted to get as many people out as we could. And in the course of a very short order of time, 122,000, the largest airlift that the U.S. military has conducted, got 122,000 people to safety. Now, there will be a time when this is complete that the State Department can do the math and figure this out. But I think we're all focused right now on continuing the mission that the General described us doing and making sure that right up until the end that we can get people out safely, including evacuees.
And then secondly, we have sources that say Marines guarding the airport allowed relatives and extended family members of Kabul embassy local staff, despite not having documentation. but meanwhile, spouses and children of Afghans who hold American citizenship and legal permanent resident status were turned away in some cases. Have you heard this as well, and can you confirm this?
I have not heard those reports, and I cannot verify them. I will tell you that without speaking to these reports, the Marines and the soldiers that have, for the last couple of weeks, been helping consular officers man these gates and help process people in did heroic work. And they had to make decisions in real time about trying to help people get out. And the numbers speak for themselves. 122,000 plus that is significant. And a lot of lives were saved. And a lot of lives are now in a better place, and they're going to have opportunities they couldn't have had before, thanks to the work that these troops did in concert with their State Department colleagues at these very dangerous gates.
And one more, if I may, not on Afghanistan. Beijing has come out with a new South China Sea policy, which forces people to self-identify while approaching their self-claimed maritime territories. This policy reportedly goes into effect on Wednesday. Does DoD plan on following that policy?
I haven't seen this report, Carla, so I'm not going to take it from the podium right now. What I will do is take the question back, and we'll try to get you a better answer. But you're hitting me up with a statement from the Chinese that I have not seen, and I'm not going to speculate at this time. Nazira.
Thank you, John. There's a question that many of Afghans ask me want me to ask you. They said, why President Biden not warning the Taliban that if any of a U.S. citizen or Afghan allies are hurt or killed after our departure from Afghanistan, their leadership will be targeted, just like ISIS was targeted recently?
Nazir, thanks for the question. I think the president has been very clear that what our expectations are once this retrograde is complete with respect to the safety and security of American citizens. I mean, I think we've been very clear about that. And as you heard Secretary Blinken say, we're going to continue to pursue a variety of means to help those Americans who want to get out after we are gone, get out. Yeah, Tom.
You talked about flights heading to Dulles and Philly. Can you give us a sense of how many people are on those flights and the breakdown of Afghans and the U.S.?
I can't give you the, by manifest, so what we think is of today's 17 flights, 3,700, the majority of those are Afghans. Now, as a priority at these lily pads that are done are immediately to get the American citizens there first, and then, other green card holders on those pieces. But the majority of the flights today of those 17 are Afghans.
Now, I understand the congressional people are being briefed that you're starting to destroy munitions as well as equipment. Can you give us a sense of that effort?
At Kabul? Yeah. What I go back to is commanders on the ground retain that authority and the capability to remove or destroy equipment and weapons to ensure that those don't fall into the hands of anybody else.
Well, are we going to get an accounting of what has been destroyed, let's say Blackhawks or other equipment?
I think when the time is right, we'll be able to try to help better flesh that out. Time's not right for that right now, Tom. Barb.
Two quick questions, if I may. On the strike against the vehicle, the Central Command talked about secondary explosions, I think, in that, but do you actually have visual evidence that there were secondary explosions? Are you convinced that there were? Because that seems to be one of the potential contributing factors to civilian casualties. So are you certain there were secondary explosions?
Yes.
I just have a follow-up on a different part of this. Can you say how you're sure?
No.
My other question then is this: as we inevitably come down to the final hours, what advice or thoughts for American passport holders or green card holders who might be trying to get to the airport and get through? Is there still time for them?
There is still time, and the State Department is in touch, we know, with additional American citizens. Again, given the tense security environment that we're dealing with, I think I'm just I think it'd be better to just not talk about it much more than that. But they are in contact. Court.
What do you mean by there's still time that flights will continue tomorrow on the 31st?
I'm not going to get ahead of the actual operational schedule, Courtney. I'm not going to do that.
And then can you, a little bit more on the continuing strike from ISIS-K. After the U.S. is completely out on the 31st, will you coordinate with the Taliban or give them notice if you plan to conduct more strikes against ISIS?
I don't think it's...